Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're taking a first look at Week 8 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. Keep in mind this video is being recorded very early in the week, so things are going to change throughout, but just a first look, first reaction to the pricing insight on DraftKings this weekend. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become a official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Optimizers, ownership projections, cheat sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff for every sport. Link is down below. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're new signing up on PrizePicks, you get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think it'll be it for the plugs for the most part, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position. To be honest, there's not a whole lot I'm liking this weekend. I feel like there's going to be one big chalk quarterback that's going to take a ton of ownership up just because of what he can do on the ground. I mean, he's not the greatest passer out there, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But up top, we have Josh Allen versus Miami. Their defense has obviously not been very good so far this season. And Allen is one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in all of football. They throw the ball a lot, 47 times last game versus Tennessee. 32, 39, 21, and 40 fantasy points in the past 4 games. He's got all the weapons in the world to get the ball to. Obviously, no Dustin Knox now with the broken hand, but he still has Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders. Tom Sweeney will fill in for the tight end position. But if you had the money for Allen this weekend, don't have a problem with that. I feel like he's more of a tournament option for me versus Miami, though, but especially for that price point. But, I mean, Josh Allen's fine if you got the money. Matthew Stafford gets a good spot versus Houston. This offense is just going to put up a lot of points pretty much each and every single week. 28 last week. 30, 26, 20, 20, 32 for Matthew Stafford since week 3. He's got all the weapons in the world to get the ball to. Him and Cooper Kupp have just been such a good duo so far this year. Robert Woods, Darrell Henderson on the backfield, Van Jefferson, he even got into the end zone last week, and they have Deshaun Jackson on the long ball, Tyler Higbee. No shortage of weapons here for the Los Angeles Rams. They have been amazing all season long. I believe they have the highest implied team total on the slate currently. They are 14.5-point favorites, but they were, 15.5-point favorites last week, and Matthew Stafford was still fine. So, and even Darrell Henderson actually busted that week. So I have no problem going to go back to the Matthew Stafford. Well, he has been fantastic all season long. Definitely a candidate to be an MVP this season. But I think the quarterback everyone's going to roster this weekend is going to be Jalen Hurts here versus Detroit. And this is not to say Jalen Hurts is a very good quarterback. Like, he looks terrible if you're watching the games, but he still gets all the fantasy points each and every single week. I saw a stat where he's getting isn't it like nearly 50% of his fantasy points are in the fourth quarter? He's just the garbage time king. Not sure how much garbage time there'll be here versus Detroit, but he might just get actual real points during the game instead of garbage time. But he's been great all year long. He doesn't have a bad fantasy game. 24, 26, 23, 31, 25, and 21 and 28 in week 1 versus Atlanta. Now we get Detroit, one of the worst defenses in football. An absolute terrible run defense, and Jalen Hurts does a lot of his damage on the ground. 61, 44, 30, 47, 35 rushing touchdowns in multiple weeks this season. So yeah, I'm liking Hurts a lot. I know he's kind of expensive here at $7,200, but he's one of the safest quarterbacks you can roster each and every single week. They don't have a bad total. They're like at 25.5 points. He's got some decent pass catching options in Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert, who aren't super expensive. So I think Jalen Hurts is definitely a fantastic option this weekend. He's the quarterback I am going to plug in. If you want a cheaper quarterback this week, Tannehill versus Indy, Matt Ryan versus Carolina is somewhat interesting just because his pass catching options aren't insanely expensive, and Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley. I know Kyle Pitts is kind of expensive for a tight end, but you really have to think of him as a wide receiver because that's basically what he is. Carson Wentz wasn't terrible in a rainstorm versus the 49ers, had 3 total touchdowns, 1 rushing. It's a good matchup versus Tennessee, who's been terrible defensively this season, especially versus the pass. And if you want to get kind of gross, Trevor Lawrence here, only $5,500 versus Seattle. Doesn't really get a lot of touchdowns, but I don't hate it. He's got a little bit of a rushing floor, but honestly, I feel like a lot of people are just going to go Jalen Hurts, and if you're playing cash this week, it's going to be really hard to get away from him. And then moving on to the running back position, you got 2 big dogs up top here in Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara. If you rostered Derrick Henry last week, you were pretty disappointed. Not that he had a bad game necessarily. It was very close to 100 rushing yards, but he did not get to the end zone. And if Derrick Henry does not get to the end zone, you are not going to have a good day, especially at a near $9,000 price point. I guess technically he got into the end zone, but he threw the ball, which, I mean, it gave him a nice little 16.4 fantasy points. But if you're rostering Derrick Henry, you're needing pretty much 30 plus out of him, and it's hard for him to get there unless he's scoring touchdowns because he isn't really using the passing game too much. I know earlier in the year we thought he was going to have a kind of a bigger role in the passing game because he had 4 and 6 targets through 2 weeks. It's kind of went away a little bit. He's still getting like a couple of targets, but I mean, 16, 13 yards. It's obviously not like an Alvin Kamara CMC role, but he's going to get those near 30 carries on the ground. Facing the Colts here, we saw Eli Mitchell beat them up for a little bit, and the 49ers kind of got away from the run for a little bit. But, I mean, Derrick Henry should be fine. I don't think he's a must-play this week because there's so many good mid-range running backs. But if you have the money for him, obviously don't have a problem with that. Alvin Kamara, if you guys watched the Monday night game, absolutely destroyed Seattle through the air. Had 11 targets, 10 catches, 36.9 fantasy points. You know, it's about time they really start using him in the passing game. I know he had 8 targets versus Washington, but just get Alvin Kamara in open space. You don't have to do halfback dives for like 3 to 5 yards the entire game. Just get him in open space. They can do a lot of good things. Tampa Bay is a tough run defense, but I mean, if they utilize him like they did last night versus the Seahawks, I think he should be solid, but probably more of a tournament option there just because the mid-range is loaded. Like we have Jonathan Taylor here versus Tennessee, DeAndre Swift versus Philly, who I'm going to talk about in a second, Joe Mixon versus the Jets. It's a great spot. James Robinson versus Seattle. Darrell Henderson's going to be the chalk again versus Houston. You even have Uncle Lenny here versus New Orleans, who does have a good run defense, but I'll take the Bucs offense over any defense any single day, especially the RB1 on that team is going to put up a lot of points each and every single week. Chuba Hubbard disappointed, but the Panthers looked terrible last weekend versus the Giants. Gaskin really not interested there. I feel like that's the end of the main running backs I want to talk about. So the first guy we're going to plug in for this lineup, since we have Jalen Hurts, I'm going to put a pass catching option with Jalen Hurts. I want a run back option, and DeAndre Swift's actually the best run back option we have on Detroit. I know he's a running back, but when you roster DeAndre Swift, you're kind of getting like an Alvin Kamara these days. He's pretty much an RB2 in terms of volume, and he's a wide receiver 2/wide receiver 1 some weeks. And his volume through the air, like he is getting massive volume when it comes to the passing game. 10, 7, 6, 6, 7, 5, and 11 targets. He's got around a 21% target share in the season, which is insane for a running back. And he's been fantastic. He has like, one bad game of 8.9 points. I guess we're going to count Green Bay 11.8. But besides that, he's got a super safe floor. And if they're trailing, that's totally fine because he's going to be used as a wide receiver. And I would take that all day. So DeAndre Swift, one of the best plays at running back this week, and I'm going to plug him in here. Now, he did get a price hike. Usually he's been sitting around that $6,000 price point. Let me look at his prices. Yeah, 6.3, 6.1. So he definitely is up in price, but I think it's deserved because he has been one of the best running backs in football. I think he's, second in fantasy points scored, only behind Derrick Henry this season in PPR formats. And since we have Swift, the one guy I want to make sure we get in, I'd like to get 3 of these running backs. I'm not sure if it'll fit, but I would like to get 3. But Darrell Henderson, $6,500. I know we somewhat busted last week, had close to 10 fantasy points. He still had 15 carries and 6 targets, which is 21 total opportunities, which is pretty darn good at $6,600 versus Detroit. If I do it again, I would definitely do it. And I'm going to do it again, pretty much a similar spot versus Houston. Not a very good defense. They're massive favorites again, 2 touchdown favorites, and they should run with Darrell Henderson. I don't think he's going to have too much problems here. He did not get into the end zone. That was the problem. This is his worst game of the season last week versus Detroit. Go figure. Pretty much the worst run defense in football, but can't really expect that to happen again. If we're going to get 21 total opportunities versus Houston for running back that's $6,500 and a massive team total and one of the best offenses in football, I would take that each and every single day. I don't really care who the running back is. But Henderson, he's a good back. Won the passing game. He pretty much checks all the boxes. He checked all the boxes last week. He's going to check them again, and he's $100 cheaper, so I don't see why you wouldn't like Darrell Henderson. Don't let one bad game steer you in the wrong direction because I think he's a fantastic play once again. So going that route, we have just under $5,000 left per player, which throwing a cheap defense, we're probably talking like mid 5K range, which we can do. Now we might go with one expensive wide receiver, which could definitely bump that down a little bit, but we'll talk through this here. Cooper Kupp, $9,000. If you have the money for him, just play him every single week. I liked him a lot last week. Could not get him into my cash game out just because of the price point. It still worked out because I had DeAndre Swift, Leonard Fournette in there, and they kind of bailed me out at the end. So I was thankful for that. But Cooper Kupp, man, just so good. He is so good. Double-digit targets each and every single week. 13, 12, 10, 13, 12, 11, and 10. Just fantasy points galore. Had a little bit of a low stretch here in weeks 4 and 5 with 11 and 16 points. But besides that, around 30, 40 fantasy points each and every single week. So if you got the money for him, great. Play Cooper Kupp. Stephon Diggs should about eat up Miami. He had a great game versus Tennessee. I think he's going to turn the tide there. Mike Williams just seems a bit overpriced, plus a tough matchup versus New England. Tim McCoy had a great game versus Green Bay. Jamar Chase is just an absolute stud. Gets a good matchup versus the Jets. He's just so good. I did not think he was going to be this good this year. I mean, I thought the guy was going to be a stud, but not this quick. But he's pretty much going to be rewriting the rookie records at the wide receiver position. He's just amazing. I don't know if I have the money for him in this lineup, and I do have a lot of interest in Joe Mixon, but Jamar Chase is always going to be in play. DJ Moore versus Atlanta. I'm going to have to probably try to find like a mid-range wide receiver, though, to be honest. Calvin really looks pretty interesting here. A.J. Brown had a big game versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is a really good matchup versus the Colts, so I could see him being in consideration once again. DK Metcalf had an 84-yard touchdown last night versus Marshawn Lattimore. Then they pretty much didn't use him ever again. I want to say he finished with 3 targets, but that was it. Like, I don't understand that play calling at all. But Calvin Ridley here at 6,600 bucks. I know he didn't really have the greatest game. He got into the end zone, but he had 10 targets. Like, all we can ask for is volume. I know it didn't look pretty. I think he dropped a couple passes as well, but I mean, so far this season, the games he's played, he's only played 5 games, but 8, 10, 11, 13, 10 targets. Carolina was really hot to start the season. Now they just look bad. So I think it's 6,600 bucks. We could probably keep riding this Calvin Ridley train because he's just too cheap. The guy's a very talented wide receiver. He's going to get plenty of volume. He's going to pop at some point. So I'll just plug him in for now. I'm not sure I'm going to just lock and load Calvin Ridley once again this week, but I mean, obviously I think he's a fine option. But I do want a pass catching option with Jalen Hurts. Now we could use Dallas Goedert at the tight end position, but I'm thinking I might want to go a little bit cheaper there just to make some more things work up top at the wide receiver position. So I'm thinking Devontae Smith here at 5,500 bucks is going to be the guy we're going to roster. I know he's been a bit up or down this season, had 9 targets last week. He's not really doing too much, though. I think he has 1 touchdown this season. That was week 1 versus Atlanta. Besides that, he had a great game versus KC, although everyone has a great game versus KC. Decent game versus Carolina, but definitely has been a bit up or down, but he has a huge market share of team's air yards here. The ball's got to go somewhere. I mean, I know Jalen Hurts it goes somewhere. A lot of it's on the ground for him, but 5,500 bucks, great matchup versus Detroit. They don't really have anyone good defensively that can guard Devontae Smith. It just depends on if Jalen Hurts can get him the ball or not. So we'll plug him in at 5,500 bucks. Seems like a pretty fair price point to me. That's going to leave us just under $4,300 left for our remaining players. I want to throw in a cheap defense. Got to be honest, I don't really care who I play. I'll just plug in whoever. I don't think we have a Cardinals defense that is just obvious chalk this week. I mean, that was just too easy last weekend. 3,100 bucks. Just plug them in. I think did we get 11 points? I mean, that's just one of the easiest defensive plays ever, in my opinion. Patriots, they're a good defense, 2,800 bucks, but they're playing the Chargers. Don't love that. Seahawks versus Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence is always good for a few turnovers and a pick 6 here and there. I don't like the Seahawks defense, but I do like James Robinson. I have little interest in Trevor Lawrence, but 2,800 bucks isn't that bad of a price point. We could use the Eagles versus Detroit. I mean, I think that's actually a very good spot. The problem is I kind of want that game to blow out, not blow out, I should say. I guess I want it to pop off. A lot of points scored on both sides, so they just keep going back and forth. So I'm not sure correlation-wise it would make sense, and I already have DeAndre Swift. So just for right now, let's just plug in the Seahawks. It doesn't feel great. I'm not sure if there's anything cheaper I would like. Jaguars versus Seattle. It's Geno Smith, but I'm not sure I really want to go that route. The Lions versus Philly. If I wasn't using the Eagles stack, I think the Lions would be somewhat viable just because I'm not really too scared of the Philly offense, especially without Miles Sanders. Colts versus Tennessee. Don't really want to go that route. So I guess we'll just stick with the Seahawks as for right now. That leaves us $4,000 left for the last few spots. I would like to try to get 3 running backs in here because it's just loaded in the mid-range, and I just feel like there's so many good plays there, like Leonard Fournette, Damian Harris. The Chargers are really bad versus the run. They had 2 running backs inactive last week. He had a great game. Not sure if that'll be the case once again, but we have James Robinson here. I already have sound defense, so I'm not going to go that route. Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon. I really like Joe Mixon on this slate. I mean, he's just going to get all the volume. The Cincinnati Bengals look really good. They should be able to kill the New York Jets. Didn't have a great game last week. Had that nice 21-yard touchdown, though, but he's going to be around 20 total touches. I mean, it's hard not to like Joe Mixon, but I'm not exactly sure I want to go that route. So I guess we'll probably just try to throw in another wide receiver. Or I guess we could probably use our tight end. If we want to go a double stack with Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert would be the guy here at 4,700 bucks. Didn't really do a lot last week, but he did have 3 catches for 70 yards, so he just kind of had a bunch of chunk plays really for the most part. If we plugged him in, that's kind of similar at 4,800 bucks left for the remaining spots. We'd probably have to use a cheap wide receiver to get a decent running back in the flex spot, or if we want to go cheap at tight end, there's a couple guys down low like Sweeney and Dan Arnold that I think are somewhat interesting here. I know we already have the Seattle defense, but I don't really care the defenses, to be honest. I honestly might just X that out and see who fits at the end. So the reason I think Dan Arnold is somewhat interesting is just because he's been the tight end one in this offense. Past 2 weeks, he's had 8 and 5 targets, 11 and 4.7 fantasy points. I know it's not exciting, but at least he's on the field, and he's only 2,800 bucks. Like, what more can you really ask for? So if we plug that in at 2,800 bucks, use a cheap defense, we're probably talking around $5,000 to $6,000 for the last couple of spots, which does not seem that bad in my opinion. You have Leonard Fournette here. We have a lot of guys in the 6K range that I think are very strong plays on this slate. But there's a couple ways we can go here. And obviously, you don't have to spend all the way down at tight end, but your roster construction will look a little bit different. There's a couple guys in the 5K range I think look pretty good at wide receiver. Michael Pittman, if T.Y. Hilton misses once again, it sounds like he's going to be back, but if he's out, I mean, Pittman's been great this year, and he's got a great matchup versus Tennessee. I mean, they were like dead last versus wide receiver position heading into last weekend. Obviously, the Chiefs did not do anything whatsoever versus them. I'm not sure what the heck is happening with the Chiefs offense, but they look real bad. But they're still a very bad pass defense. I don't think that needs to be disputed. But if T.Y. Hilton is back, it obviously hurts his ceiling a little bit. T. Higgins versus the Jets. He's getting plenty of targets. He had 15 last week. He's just not doing too many with them, but I think it's a fine spot here. Everyone's going to be chasing the big Chase game, which I totally get. Chase has definitely been the alpha dog in this offense, but let's not ignore 15 targets here. That's a lot, especially when they were handling this team. I mean, they won easily versus the Ravens, so if we just plug in T. Higgins, we probably won't use Joe Mixon in this lineup, and I don't know if we plug in just let me just see to get an idea of what we have left. So if I just plug in like a 6,500 Keenan Allen, that leaves me 2,600. So probably going to be living in the 6K range, which, like I said, there's a few running backs that I think make sense. Chris Godwin. If Antonio Brown is out once again, it's definitely still a big boost for Godwin, because Marshawn Lattimore is going to be all over Mike Evans, and they have a long thing going. I feel like Mike Evans always gets shut down versus Lattimore, so Chris Godwin definitely see some softer coverage there. If you don't have Cooper Kupp and you want Robert Woods, you could go that route. Leonard Fournette, he's a fine option there, $6,300. Jalen Waddle has been getting a lot of consistent volume recently, 6, 13, and 8 targets, 29 and 15 points the past couple games. Tough matchup versus Buffalo, but if you expect them to be trailing in this game, which I do, and Tua hasn't looked too bad, I don't think Jalen Waddle is a fine run back option if you are stacking the Bills up this weekend. Leviskus Chenault, the last guy I really want to talk about here. He's only $4,700, and he had 10 targets last week. Obviously, with no DJ Shark, it's just going to be more consolidated volume. I already have Dan Arnold, though, so I'm not going to double up on the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I think he's a fine option. I mean, I know he hasn't been super amazing this year, but good matchup versus Seattle, and he's going to get the short yardage routes, which, it kind of adds up in PPR sites like DraftKings. He's not a big ceiling guy, but he's got somewhat of a floor, although it's not too pretty. Actually, I guess there's one more guy I should mention. Jerry Judy is expected to be activated from the AR, and he's playing Washington, who has been terrible versus wide receivers this season. And in week 1, didn't even play the whole game, had 7 targets, 6 catches, 13.2 fantasy points. I don't hate that. That actually doesn't look too bad at all, and he's just way too cheap. So if you want to play Judy, I wouldn't mind that at all. I'm not really sure exactly where I'm going to go with the flex spot. If I just plug in a cheap defense here, let's just say we use the Colts, Titans, Eagles. I already have the stack going on there, so I'm not really sure I want to go that route. But if we just plug in like Falcons here versus Carolina, it leaves us $6,200 left for our last spot. They can get us a guy like Patterson, Damian Harris, Tyler Lockett, Antonio Brown if he's playing. You guys can use your imagination, though. Play whoever you want. Fournette, we're missing a Fournette by $100, so if we just want to go that route, then drop our defense by $100, that's fine. Just play whoever you want there. But with that being said, that'll be pretty much it for the video. So I hope it was helpful. I know a first look video can't be too helpful. It's more for entertainment purposes, but I hope it was. And if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to take that one step further, an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new signing over there, you can get a free money bonus, instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN. You tell them I sent you. That'll be it. I'll stop rambling. I'll see you guys in the next video, which should be the showdown for the Cardinals versus the Packers.